Okay, yeah, I have mission and key terms.
Sweet. I'll have you read that and I'll do the land acknowledgement unless Randy gets here.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Hi, Drew.
Hello.
Drew, you're so punctual.
At the wire is what I would call it. Wrapped up work literally moments ago.
We're waiting for one more person to have quorum, and our guest speaker's already here.
Sorry, I almost definitely missed. Usually there's a check-in and I didn't tell you that I was going to be here, so I apologize.
No problem. Attorney Church.
Oh, great. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, great. Okay, good. I was
Thank
getting
you.
nervous.
I wanted to let you in from the waiting room. We're still waiting for one member of the commission, so we make our quorum. So you can either stay in or go out, and I'll let you back in, whatever you prefer. We just have two very minor housekeeping things after we begin, and then you're next.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just got a text that Randy is en route to City Hall. Okay, Randy's here. We have quorum. I heard you just landed. I did just land.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia LaFour. I'm the Director of Human Rights and Accessibility for the City of Worcester. This is the August regular meeting of the Human Rights Commission for the City of Worcester. I will let the Chair, Guillermo Creamer Jr., make any introductory remarks.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delayed start. Thanks so much for holding out. I'm going to call the meeting to order now, and we're going to do a quick attendance roll call.
So roll call of the members present, please. If you're virtual, please say so. If you're present here in the chamber, please say so. Chairperson Guillermo Creamer Jr.
Here.
Present in the chamber. Vice Chair Randy Feldman.
Here.
Present in the chamber. Clerk Carrie Witherell.
Here virtually.
Thank you. Member Robert Bellotta. Member Bernard Reese. Member Jacqueline Yang. Member Drew Schneblin.
Here, virtually.
Thank you. Reverend Jonathan Slavinskis. Member Anahit Marudian.
Here, virtually.
Thank you all. We do have a quorum. I yield back to the chair.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I know it's hard to get people together in the summer months, so really appreciate you all being here for that. I am going to ask really quickly for our clerk to read some key terms, and afterwards she'll toss it over to me and I'll do the land acknowledgement. And then we'll get some quick stuff going and allow our guests to go towards the beginning. So, clerk?
Great, thank you. Human Rights Commission mission. The HRC was established to promote the city's human rights policy. It is the policy of the city to assure that every individual shall have equal access to and benefit from all public services, to protect every individual in the enjoyment and exercise of civil rights, and to encourage and bring about mutual understanding and respect among all individuals of the city. It is the goal of the HRC to ensure that all city residents are treated fairly and equally by eliminating bigotry, discrimination, intolerance, and prejudice. Our work requires us to address institutional racism so that as a community we can achieve racial equity. Our work also requires us to make visible the unheard, unearned, and unquestioned privilege enjoyed by some members of our community to the detriment of others. We take time to make this acknowledgement, to educate, so that a path can be cleared for healing. Key terms: institutional racism. The term institutional racism refers specifically to the ways in which institutional policies create different outcomes for different racial groups. The institutional policies may never mention any racial groups, but their effect is to create advantages for whites and oppression and disadvantage for people from groups classified as people of color. Racial equity. The term racial equity is the active state in which race does not determine one's livelihood or success. It is achieved through proactive work to address root causes of inequalities to improve outcomes for all individuals. That is, through the elimination or shifting of policies, practices, attitudes, and cultural messages that reinforce different outcomes by race or fail to eliminate them. And privilege. The term privilege describes the unearned social power in informal institutions of society to all members of a dominant group. For example, white privilege and male privilege. Privilege is usually invisible to those who have it because we are trained not to see it, but nevertheless, it puts them at an advantage.
Thank you. Really quickly to commissioners, I'm hearing that there's feedback for the virtual folks. Is that still happening?
It's a wicked echo on my side, and I really don't want that to happen if Susan's about to talk to us for a little bit.
Can we get the tech folks to help us out here?
It was fine.
Drew, is that any better?
It's fine for me right now, although I got muted halfway through that.
Yeah, I muted you to see if, because
Oh.
sometimes if you're not on mute, that's where we get the feedback. You should be on
Yeah,
mute except for when you're speaking.
Yeah, I was on mute earlier. Maybe it was just me. If it was just me, then no problem. I'll make sure I'm muted.
No, I saw a head shake for everyone. I don't think it was just you.
Like I can try
Yeah, I
to
had a
talk again.
issue too.
No,
Are you hearing anything? No.
no, clerk, we heard everything that you said, and we obviously don't hear the echo that you all hear. But if you all are hearing an echo, that's a problem, obviously, because our guest is virtual.
It seems better. Yes?
Do you want me to try? How's it better when I speak? Can you hear me? Okay. So
Okay. All right. So we did something. All right. So let me just quickly kind of shift gears here. So I am going to really quickly read the land acknowledgement, and then I'm just going to toss it over to our guest, and then we'll handle everything else on the back end. So we will continue our practice of acknowledging the traditional ancestral territory of the First Peoples of Massachusetts on which land we are convening on tonight. The Nipmuc Nation is what is now Worcester County. While the Nipmuc history predates written history, records from the 1600s inform us that the original inhabitants of Worcester dwelled principally in 3 locations: Packagug, Tatsit, and Wigwam Hill. It is important to make this acknowledgement and to honor the ancestors that have come before us. Unfortunately, it is too easy to live in a land without ever hearing the traditional names and history of the people who first resided and prospered in these lands and continue to reside and prosper. So I'm gonna move the agenda around if that's okay with everyone. But we're gonna start with the presentation from Attorney Church. So I'm going to hand it over to her to kind of talk to us and give us her stuff, and then afterwards, when we're done, we'll do commission stuff. Sound good, everyone? Great, thank you. Attorney Church, the floor is yours.
thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen now. This is what we've been calling Know Your Rights 3.0. It's supposed to be a little more advanced than all the Know Your Rights presentations that have been going around. With the group of people here, I really encourage you to go ahead and interrupt me with questions. So it could be a more interactive conversation. Just as way as background, you probably already know all this, but this is what we do in every Know Your Rights presentation. Immigration is, and all the issues surrounding immigration is covered by the Department of Homeland Security and federal. So underneath the Department of Homeland Security, of course, many sub-agencies. The one you're probably most familiar with, ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They are the individuals you're seeing in the streets with masks and with, plain clothes. But there are also individuals called an agency called HSI, or Homeland Security Investigations. HSI used to be an agency that focused on very serious crimes such as human trafficking. They prosecuted a genocide perpetrator in federal court in Massachusetts. They were even credited with bringing a Nazi to justice in 2008 in New York. Now, under this administration, HSI is tasked by and large with visa overstays, and they are in charge with special immigrant juveniles, bringing the guardians of special immigrant juveniles into court to have in-person meetings with them, and to be perfectly honestly, scaring the you-know-what out of the parents. And they're also doing in-person visits with children at their homes who are special immigrant juveniles. ICE is also the prosecutors in immigration court, so they're the ones that sit next to the immigration attorney and argue with the judge on behalf of the government. Different from ICE is CBP. You've probably most likely encountered CBP when you've flown back into the United States. They see everybody who comes in and out of the country. It's the Office of Field Operations. They wear the blue jackets, and they're the ones that admit you with your passport. They're also responsible for something called secondary inspection, which anybody can be subjected to: U.S. citizen, lawful permanent resident, visa holder, anybody. Unfortunately, there is a ruling in the First Circuit, which is our state, that says that anybody who's a U.S. citizen is subject to this secondary inspection, and that can include searching a computer or a phone, even if the government does not have reasonable articulable suspicion or probable cause to search that phone. So the way that's played out under this administration is we know of at least 2 instances where U.S. citizen attorneys, not just U.S. citizens, but attorneys, were asked to provide their phone. The attorney said, this is attorney-client privilege. I can't give you the phone. There was back and forth. Both attorneys, one was in Detroit and one was in Canada. They had a standoff. And then both were let go, one after 3 hours, one after 6 hours. And then at least one of them was an attorney who was an advocate for students who had been arrested or under investigation for the protest around Gaza. Unfortunately, CBP, under the law, has the power to conduct enforcement anywhere in the United States within 100 miles of our border. So what we've also seen, in addition to them doing checkpoints at the point of entry, we've seen them in roadblocks, essentially, in Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And much of the enforcement right now going on in Maine is done by CBP and not by ICE, presumably because they can't get ICE up into those areas, or the field office isn't close enough. So much of the arrests going on in Maine right now are all CBP-based arrests. Different from ICE and CBP, but honestly starting to look, I'm worried it's going to look more and more like CBP, is USCIS, or United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. USCIS, they decide whether you get asylum, citizenship, a green card. They're considered a benefits agency. And in the past, they had at least like a fence between ICE and CBP so that they were considered safe to walk into. We're seeing lots of, to be honest, terrifying memos from ICE saying, or USCIS saying, it doesn't matter if you're married to a U.S. citizen and you're completely legally entitled to your green card, we might still arrest you, right? And so that would turn, if they really used USCIS as more of an enforcement agency rather than a benefits agency as it's designed, that could turn into some really serious, heartbreaking situation for families. So I did this slide as an immigration enforcement slide. I did this slide before they took office based on my prior experience when I was an immigration lawyer under Trump 1.0. This is what we are continuing to see, but I've had to add a whole additional slide on to really go over all the different ways we're seeing enforcement. So first on the list is, but not first in level of enforcement, but certainly a very common level of enforcement, is any contact with the criminal justice system. The way that works is when a person is arrested, let's say they're arrested for driving without a license or drunk driving, their fingerprints are taken by the local police, and then the local police are legally required to send them to the FBI. And then the FBI pings ICE, essentially, or their systems talk to each other. So then ICE will know, oh, this person got arrested in Worcester on Tuesday. They're going to be in the Worcester District Court on Wednesday. And then ICE is often waiting for them in the courthouse. What that doesn't mean, however, is that victims of crimes and victims of domestic violence, they don't have the same system, right? They don't have a fingerprint that gets pinged in. Victims of domestic violence, they're not on ICE's radar when ICE is in court in any given day. Same with a witness to a crime or a victim of a crime. The ICE doesn't know that that person's there. Similarly, we don't see any sort of pinging when people are going to USCIS, except when someone has a final order of removal. Okay, and that is where somebody has lost their entire immigration case from beginning to end. Their case is over. People married to U.S. citizens in the state of Massachusetts are under a protective order from the federal court, but in other states, they will arrest you at the interview, even if you're legally entitled to process your green card. Certainly criminal charges that mean you're ineligible for a benefit, you'll see arrest at USCIS around that. Green card holders. So we are seeing green card holders with pretty minor criminal records, 15, 20 years old, being arrested upon return from travel. So you might have heard about the woman recently who's married to a Department of Homeland Security employee. They were coming back from a family vacation. She has a 20-year-old charge for possession of marijuana that was sealed. And that one was held and detained for 10 days, brought all around the state, I think she ended up in Maine at some point in time, had some serious health problems, was rushed to the hospital not once or twice. But it is really difficult to travel as a green card holder with any criminal history at all. People need to be very much in touch with a lawyer. Similarly, a visa holder is legally subjected to something called expedited removal if they are traveling into the United States and CBP decides that they are subject to fraud or immigrant intent. That power is really broad. Okay, so a person who's been traveling back and forth on their B1, B2 for 30 years, they can just take that B2 visa and crush it up. And there's no limit on their power if they find that that visa somehow was obtained through fraud or other issues. Raids and targeted enforcement, that's obviously, we've all seen those. Attending ICE appointments, so people voluntarily walking into ICE and then as they arrive at the ICE appointment are being arrested. But we've also seen lawyers been able to persuade ICE not to arrest those people. So that's something just to keep an eye out for. And we're definitely seeing ICE communicate with people telling them they have to leave the country right away. Most of those people really need to go see an immigration lawyer. In addition, we're seeing courthouse arrest in immigration court. 25 years I've been an immigration lawyer. I've been in and out of immigration court countless times. I've never once seen anyone arrested. This administration is arresting them in the courthouse. It's particularly for those who've been here for less than 2 years. That seems to be their focus. People can say, I object, I don't want my case dismissed, and ICE is taking them anyways because having the case pending is supposed to be a protection against expedited removal, but they're kind of ignoring that. And people are having to go to federal court and file a habeas corpus petition to help. Pending applications, including asylum, do not prevent courthouse arrest. Work authorization does not prevent any arrest. We're also seeing call-in letters, which also call them into sometimes to court and to ICE. And so those are really ramping up in numbers, and collateral arrests. Anybody in work car, near a Target, Home Depot, in a work truck that has, letterings on it that seem like they might be carpenters or roofers, we're definitely seeing targeting of that. Any questions before I go on? Okay. So ICE, this is kind of the more detailed what ICE's authority is. I think you'll probably find this relatively unsatisfactory because even though this is the authority of ICE, there's no way to really enforce it anymore, right? So under prior administrations, including Trump 1.0, if ICE officers committed wrongdoing, there was the Office of Civil Rights, and you could go to that office and you could file a complaint against them. There were some rights to file federal court actions, but the Supreme Court has recently undone that. It's called a Bivens action. So the only thing left to really challenge ICE is a individual tort claim against the ICE officers. Well, as you know, they're usually mass, so it makes it really challenging. Overall, ICE is a federal law enforcement agency. They can act as kind of a criminal agency when they act in concert with federal or state law enforcement, like investigating a crime. Some of those crimes are immigration-related crimes. For example, they sometimes get warrants for re-entry after deportation. Even though they're a civil law enforcement agency, they do have to follow the Constitution. And anybody caught engaging with ICE has the right to remain silent and to an attorney. So everybody asks me, do I have to show ID if ICE asks me? I'm a citizen. Do I have to show ID if ICE asks me? So the rule is ICE does not have any authority over a U.S. citizen at all, unless they're moving to denaturalize that U.S. citizen. However, immigrants are legally required to carry identification on them, including copies of a green card or proof of registration. Depending on the facts and circumstances, ICE officers, when they have probable cause to believe a person's here unlawfully, can ask for ID. What the problem is that you as a citizen don't know whether or not they're asking for ID because they know you're here undocumented, or you as a non-citizen because you're here undocumented, or whether they're asking you for ID because they don't know anything about you and they're acting based on what the California courts have said is allegations of skin color and speaking Spanish, right? There's a case in California alleging that right now. So ICE can interrogate a non-citizen just as any human can walk up to any human on the street and ask them questions. But ICE can't decide to approach an individual, at least for now. Again, this case is now in front of the Supreme Court that will maybe address this issue. We don't know what they're going to decide. But at least for now, the sole reason for approaching somebody can't be on race or nationality. So warrants. ICE is required to get a judicial warrant to enter into a person's home. Whether or not something is a judicial warrant, the only way to determine that is to look at the face of the warrant. So on your left is an example of a judicial warrant. It says United States District Court, as the word court. It says search and seizure, meaning that it's authorizing them to look for evidence of a crime, which also tells you it's a judicial warrant. And it has a judge's signature. Without a judicial warrant, ICE is not authorized to access private locations. Everybody asks, well, what's a private location? There's no clear line that says this is not private, but you can generally think about private as places where the general public does not have access. Okay, so generally that means like a school where there's a sign-in sheet or a buzzer is a private area. ICE would need a judicial warrant to enter. A group home where you have to be a resident of the group home to enter, generally ICE would need a judicial warrant to enter that home. Things that show that something's private are signs that say private, sign-in sheets, locked doors, ticketed entry, or clear policies and rules that say the general public's not allowed. What's a public place? Well, a football game where you don't need tickets, or a public park, or a local playground. Those are all public places. This is a non-judicial warrant. This is what we call an ICE administrative warrant. You can tell because it says Department of Homeland Security. It uses the word alien. Our courts do not use that word. And down here it says signature of authorized immigration officer. State court warrants, again, this is search, so it shows you they're looking for evidence of a crime. It says court, so we know it's a judicial warrant. And state court warrants can be signed by a judge, clerk, magistrate, or assistant clerk. They don't all look the same, but this is generally how the electronic ones look. So ICE, we learned earlier that ICE needs a judicial warrant in order to enter a private location, including a home. If ICE does come to the door of a home, legally, you as the homeowner who live in the house, or even if you're just staying in the house, do not need to open the door unless the officer provides you with a warrant signed by a judge. You can ask the officers to identify themselves. You can ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge. You can assert your right to remain silent and to an attorney, including if arrested by ICE. If you choose to invoke that right, you state, I request my right to silence and to an attorney. One way to assert these rights is to use a Know Your Rights card, which will show you how to order. So what if ICE has a warrant, but you're not in a private location, right? You're either in a car or you're out on the street. If you're in a car, the rule is that ICE has to have a reasonable suspicion of an immigration violation to initiate a car stop. That's a standard language that's very similar to what the local and state police are required in order to pull over a car. Lawyers call it a Terry stop. If the person's not in a home and they have an administrative warrant, but they want to arrest them on the street, they have to have probable cause to arrest them on the street. So that's with a warrant. There is no law that I'm aware of that I've looked that says that ICE officers cannot be masked. And the law around showing a badge, it's according to internal ICE policies, right? So these are not, these are things that can be easily changed. But the last we saw public pronouncements about this, it said showing a badge. An ICE officer would be required to do that as soon as practical and safe to do so during the arrest. In practice, we're often seeing them not show a badge till well after the person's in handcuffs. If ICE is trying to arrest somebody outside a home without a warrant, so the last two standards were with a warrant, without a warrant, and the vast majority of cases that are coming to ORI's attention are cases without a warrant, meaning that, again, they are seeing somebody at Home Depot and the day laborer line, they see somebody driving with, maybe they know one of the people in the car, but they don't know all the other people in the car. If that's the situation and they want to see if they are able to legally arrest the other people in the car, they have to show two things. One is that the person's present in violation of immigration laws. And two, that that person is likely to escape before an arrest warrant can be obtained. Well, you have to think, ICE is arresting people in our immigration courthouses who are showing up for court. I think it's pretty hard for them to justify that that person is a flight risk if they're actually physically showing up to court for their case. So I think there's some evidence that this law is not being followed. And in Illinois, there's a lawsuit on that because they had the law for a couple of years. The law expired. Now they're trying to rejuvenate based on new violations of the rule. ICE does not have to show a warrant either. It's not even clear that ICE has to give the warrant if they have it to the immigrant, although in practice they often do. The rules just talk about them serving the warrant on the immigrant without making it a requirement. What can bystanders do? So bystanders have a legal right to witness a public arrest. And we did talk earlier about some of the only remedies of being available for a violation of rights is a lawsuit. Well, it's important to understand what happened in the lawsuit and to be a witness. Physically interfering or berating ICE, that could have adverse consequences for either you or the immigrant, so you should be aware of what your actions may mean. Everybody in this situation can help as a bystander by keeping calm and promoting calm. Massachusetts law allows for videotaping, and you just have to disclose if you're using sound, but even though the courts don't really require that, I just think that's probably best practice. You have a right as a public person in a bystander to be a witness to everything and document everything. And you can ask the immigrant, can I call somebody for you? Is there somebody I can call? Because often people are held incommunicado for days before they can actually reach a family member to tell them where they are. You can really help expedite the person's release from custody if you offer to get in touch with a family member, and helping the family prepare a bond packet and offering support that way. This is the way to order the Know Your Rights cards. We are in the, and I have to say, when we started in January, I didn't even do this slide because it was too heartbreaking, but we are now in a situation where our immigrant families in the state really need to prepare for the worst. One of the ways they can do that is by figuring out how they're going to care for their children. There is something under Massachusetts law called a caregiver affidavit. It's actually quite simple and easy to execute. It's not like a guardianship, but it just authorizes a person to step in for a parent around educational and medical decisions. Parents need to think about caring for their children ahead of time, ensuring school pickup lists are dated. Passports are a really difficult problem. So, for example, Brazil requires, in order for you to get a Brazilian passport for a child that's born in America, they require that you have a Brazilian birth certificate, and then they'll issue the passport. So it's kind of a long process. Even though you weren't born in Brazil, you still need a Brazilian birth certificate. So parents really need to know what their country of origins require and try to get passports in both countries. And keeping a list of important documents is really essential. This is the online detainee locator for ICE. This tells you how to find people if they are detained. For families at risk, if you're working or helping families, these are two great resources to help them find out. We talk to people about making a safety plan, sharing your location. If you have a lawyer, making sure the lawyer knows your location. Lawyers have a form called a G28 that tells them that they've permission to represent somebody. Having that on a client is really important. At the airport, always have a lawful permanent resident or U.S. citizen pick up at the airport. I had a client arrested in the waiting room of Terminal E as he was trying to pick somebody up. And again, if you're flying in, especially if you're alone, have copies of your lawyer's G28 and make sure your family does it well. And make sure you text somebody when you land. Because if you do end up in that secondary inspection situation, you won't be allowed to use a phone or tell anybody where you are. So you need to be able to let somebody know when you land so that they know when to start panicking. Harboring. So I am worried there's a lot of, really strong advocacy out there on behalf of immigrants, which is important and necessary. I am worried that some people and groups are going to accidentally or unintentionally cross the line into harboring. And so I think it's really important to understand what the law is. Harboring is a federal criminal offense. It makes it illegal to conceal or harbor an undocumented immigrant in a building or by means of transportation in any place. Now, it's kind of complicated because the Supreme Court recently issued a decision called the Hansen case, which seems to hopefully have narrowed this very broad law. So we don't fully know what harboring is and is not anymore because of this big expansion of the law. But Hansen is a case that, these are cases that are all pre-Hansen. So we really don't know what it's going to look like after the court post-Hansen. But employers are in particular risk of harboring when they are deliberately doing things to conceal employees from ICE. So these are 3 cases where employers did stuff to hide from ICE. Number 1, installed security systems, and they were specifically designed to let the employees know that ICE was going to be on site and to tell them to leave. Another one where they were using radio scanners to listen for Border Patrol in the Fierro's case, and that was deemed to be harboring for ICE purposes. And then in the Kim case in 1999, the employer told his employees, if ICE comes, just say you were born in New York. This is one that really started me worrying is there's one case, Ozelic, that talks about warning about impending investigations that facilitate a person's continuing illegal presence in the United States can be considered harboring. But they say in contrast, telling somebody to lay low and to stay away from the address on file with the court, well, that's not really harboring because anybody would know that. These are cases where the court said this is not harboring. Okay, this has gone too far. This is too broad. This is not harboring. One was a woman who was living with a boyfriend who she knew was undocumented. And actually, she knew he had returned from overseas, from being deported and then came back into the country. The court said that's not harboring. Another is a case where a woman shut the door on ICE as ICE was trying to come into the house to get another gentleman that was living with her. He allegedly jumped out the back door. So ICE said, where is he? And she said, I don't know, which was true because he had allegedly jumped out the back door. So she didn't lie to ICE, which was important. And the government couldn't even prove that the person was there. So in that case, that was found to be insufficient evidence for harboring. I can't predict the future. And the case law really isn't that clear, but this is my best guess as to what I would say may cross the line into harboring and may not. So I don't think it's going to be considered harboring to provide lawful assistance to a person who has documented or pending legal status. I don't think the courts are ever going to find that. I don't think it's harboring to give basic human needs assistance, such as food, clothing, or housing, right? That's not intended to hide the person from ICE. Definitely don't think legal assistance can be considered harboring, and neighborhood watches. So I know there's an organization called Luce that has something called ICE Watch, but they've, I think they've been smart about the way they're describing it. I think a neighborhood watch that helps everybody and isn't just intended to keep people here in violation of the law is not considered harboring. Lying to ICE about the whereabouts of a person known to be undocumented when they're looking for that person, probably considered harboring. And physical interference with ICE officers with this specific intent to hide a person could be considered harboring. If you're trying to help community members, one of the biggest helps that you could provide is to help them navigate the really complicated and confusing legal system. So there are private immigration attorneys out there. Many of them charge, thousands and thousands of dollars, but they often will work with you on a payment plan. So families like, oh, I can't afford that. It's $7,500, but some of them will give you 4 years to pay it, right, with $1,500 down. Also, if you've met a family that is really unhappy with their lawyer, the Board of Bar Overseers is legally required to assist the family in getting a refund with that overpayment if there's an overpayment. So they'll help negotiate with the family and the lawyer to come to a happy medium about how much was paid and whether it was right. If you're trying to figure out whether a lawyer is a good lawyer or not, which is honestly really hard, it's word of mouth isn't always great. Online ratings are really unreliable. There is the public discipline website at the BBO. If there is a record of public discipline, you can find it there under the lawyer's name. That's a good thing to help a family check that out first and foremost. And look at their experience. Are they a member of American Immigration Lawyers Association? Do they do this type of work? Legal services lawyers have really long wait lists. I'm sure you're aware. I recently heard somebody say they called 40 different nonprofits trying to get help for a client and was not able to do it. They're able to do very limited detain work. And just because they do an intake doesn't mean that they will take the case, right? If you get legal services assistance, I mean, that's extremely lucky for a client because they usually do a really great job. If you're helping somebody prepare for a bond hearing, they have to think about all the documents they need, right? They need to show identity. They need to show community ties. They need to show if they have any criminal charges, even a driving offense, driving without a license, they need to get all the copies of the documents. They need to talk to the prior criminal defense attorney. They need to check the state website. And if they have some hardship, like if their children have IEPs or if they have financial hardship or they already work with doctors or social workers, these things can be invaluable to assisting someone. Immigrants navigating this court system, it's really hard. Even a great lawyer loses cases because not everybody has relief. Missing court can equal removal. So I know they're arresting people at court, but also if they miss court, it can result in a removal order, which could end their chance to stay in the United States. Court can sometimes take all day. And clients have to spend a lot of time working with a lawyer to help them obtain documents. This link here is a link to the automated case information to help immigrants figure out when their next court date is. This is our list of legal resources that we pass out. I think Mira has a great immigration helpline and City of Boston does free consultations for City of Boston residents. Here's my good news. This is really important. With the assistance of the Attorney General's Office, ORI has helped launch a program called it's the AG's money, and ORI helped the AG's office stand it up. It's a program called the Legal Representation Fund, or LRF. It's run by Boston Immigrant Justice Accompanying Network. They are a huge number of volunteers who do the intake on the program. It helps fund free legal representation to detained immigrants. And this is like free to the immigrant entirely. They have to be Massachusetts residents, work in Massachusetts, or be detained in Massachusetts. They have to not have a final order of removal and a couple of other like really basic eligibility screenings. If the Bijan volunteer approves them for the program, they will receive the name of 3 lawyers. And then the family contacts those 3 lawyers and says, hey, I want you to represent me. If the lawyer screens them and says that they're eligible for bond, then they'll just bill Bijan and they'll do the bond case for them. So it's been working really well. There's 2 phone numbers and you can feel free to plug these right into your cell phone right now. If you ever get that call for help, I've got my husband's arrested, you can give them this number and they will be able to call this hotline. We also issued, and hopefully you've seen this, employer guidance recently. This is the link to it up top. We were seeing a lot of employers prematurely fire Haitians and Venezuelans who are valid TPS holders. But it's not that easy. It's really complicated, actually. For Venezuelan, it depends on the date on your document. For Haitians, everybody thinks they lost TPS status, temporary protected status already, but in fact, they're not going to lose it as of right now until February of 2026, right? We also talk about I-9 audits in there. We want employers to understand that they have 2 conflicting interest in deciding what to do with employees who they think might not have valid work authorization. One is that you only re-verify an immigrant generally or not an immigrant, an employee after 1 year, right? After their status is set to expire. And so if you hear the TPS has ended for Haiti, the guidance really talks about balancing the rules around I-9 about re-verification with discrimination based on national origin. And for employers to try to be really thoughtful about those two somewhat conflicting interests. And then last, it also talks about parole-based work authorizations, who some have been revoked, some not, and whether or not that really prompts a need to re-verify. That's it. I think I've got, oh, there we go. So I'm happy to take questions or let you guys get on with the rest of your evening.
Susan, this is Randy Feldman. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
How you doing?
Good to see you.
Nice, the same. So when I'm preparing the same kind of know your rights thing for churches or groups or whatever, my research sometimes tells me if the ICE has reasonable suspicion that you're unlawfully present, that would be enough for them to question and arrest you. And other things I read said that and a thought that you're likely to flee. Is it both? Do they assume both together, or is it just reasonable suspicion that you're unlawfully present is sufficient?
Okay, so it's pretty complicated. I don't know if I can make this short, but so reasonable suspicion is what's required for a car, okay? An interrogation can be anytime. They don't need anything to interrogate you. Just as you can walk up to anybody in this room and start asking them questions, they're legally allowed to walk into a room and start asking questions of anybody as long as they're not doing it solely based on national origin, okay? So interrogation, anytime, any place, don't need anything. Stopping a car is different from arresting a person in the car, right? So just to stop the car, they need reasonable suspicion. Then to get to, this is all without a warrant, right? Those two are with warrants. To arrest somebody, if they're arresting somebody with a warrant, they need probable cause. If they're arresting somebody without a warrant, they need probable cause plus the fleeing, the proof that they might flee. So that's why, and Randy, you can I'm going to send these slides out. My staff will probably send these slides out tomorrow. You can feel free to look these slides over. But that's what, it's not all that 100% clear, but that part is really clear, that the only time they are required to show flight risk is when they don't have a warrant. If they have a warrant, they only have to show probable cause.
Okay, thanks. And how about self-identifying? In some states, it seems you don't have to say your name at all. In other states, you have to say your name, but you don't have to say anything more about what country you're from or what your birth date is or anything like that. In Massachusetts, do you have to say your name?
So are you talking about to ICE?
To ICE, not driving a car. I mean, outside of driving a car. Do you have to say your name?
So it's federal. It's not a state-by-state thing. It's federal. And immigrants are required to carry ID, right? So if you're not a citizen, you are required to carry ID and some proof of your status. And as I said, they're legally allowed to come up and ask anybody any questions they want. Whether or not you have to give them that information, that ID that you're legally allowed to acquire, depends on whether the officer has probable cause to question you. And that's really the problem, is you would never know whether they have probable cause to question you. How would you know? You're not going to know what's in their mind. So it's this horrible situation where if I know I'm a green card holder and I just give them my green card, I'm going to get to go home tonight, right? But if I refuse to give it to them and they actually have a warrant for my arrest, that's going to cause all its own problems. And I just don't know. I just don't know when I'm having the encounter. So it's a really problematic rule that does not give a lot of protection to anybody, to be honest with you.
I see. And as far as when people don't cooperate, let's say ICE is looking for a certain person, they believe you know where that person is, they ask you for cooperation. If you do cooperate, do you hear much about whether people get to walk away because they cooperated, or just everybody's being taken in? Or I know there's no definite rule, but like, which one seems to happen more in your experience?
Anybody without full status, we're hearing is, I've not heard, the only people I've heard of walking away are people who are going, so let's say you're a green card holder, right? Assuming there's nothing on your record, they're not going to arrest you, they're not allowed to. But a green card holder with a charge, a conviction for theft within 5 years of entry, which is a deportable grounds, they're going to arrest you, right? So green card holders are different. Anything short of green card, they're really not letting those people go. The only exception I've heard of that is people going for an ICE check-in with a lawyer. I have heard of some lawyers going with, like, you know, a 300-page packet and armed to the teeth about the evidence, and then some people walking away from those check-ins.
I see.
And going back home.
All right. And as far as what's a public versus private space, I guess the rule of thumb has always been in a church or mosque or synagogue that the place where people have services that's open to the public to walk in for services is considered a public place. Is there any argument against that?
I've never really fully researched it. I'm not sure it's been fully tested, but I think it's a hard sell. But I do think that the rectory or the place where, if there's a rabbi, where the rabbi works, I think you could make an argument that that part is private at least. But it's a hard sell because I did meet with one synagogue that had security in front of their church before every meeting and had legal authority to let non-worshipers deny entrance. So maybe that would be because they were worried about physical threats to the congregation goers.
I see.
So maybe there's an argument there, but generally I think they're open to the public.
All right, last one. The one in LA where ICE came in, would go to a Home Depot or a bus stop, arrest people on their ethnicity, speaking Spanish, their job occupation, and that way he's now working its way up to an emergency basis to the Supreme Court about whether that's going to be legal, held to be legal or not legal for ICE to do. Any inclination on which way that one might go?
I'm not optimistic with this court. I don't know. Pretty pessimistic about everything. It's I think if I remember reading it, it was like Spanish speaking or where you work, or like the criteria was so broad. I can't imagine that it's reasonable articulable suspicion, but this court, I don't know.
All right. Thanks so much for coming to speak with us.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. Great questions.
Good evening, Attorney Church. Thank you so much for your thoughtful presentation. I just had one question for you. Have you found certain outreach methods or community partnerships to be especially effective in, making sure people know about their rights?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. Our office alone has done 11,000 Know Your Rights presentations to 11,000 people, not actual presentations, but we've been counting them and we're up at 11,000. And I do think one of the reasons why ICE is in the streets arresting people so much is that no one's opening their doors because everybody's gone to a Know Your Rights presentation. So I do think and we've heard this from a lot of organizations, Know Your Rights itself is kind of a saturated thing, people have been reached on that. ORI set up a separate program called the Community, what's it called? Not response. Community Support Initiative. It's on our website. And what we're doing now is going to community organizations meetings. So let's say the Worcester Human Rights Organization had a Monday meeting that community members often came to. ORI will come to that community meeting with immigration lawyers and probate lawyers to meet with families And we've often brought DTA or WIC or Mass Health or like any sort of the state support organizations to help families who have been affected by enforcement. So I do think that that is a really significant need right now that's not being fulfilled. And if you go on, I'll try to get our website out for you, guys, to request it. So if you know of an organization in Worcester, like I know Jillian's group is doing the meeting with the Congressman McGovern right now, like, or I could come to something like that and meet with actual families and bring these resources.
Thank you.
I think we've done it so far. We've done it in Brockton, New Bedford, Framingham. We met, I think we're doing it in the Berkshires again, like we've done a bunch of them.
Awesome. Any other commissioners? Oh, I see Clerk Witherell.
Hi, Susan. It's great to meet you. I just
Hi.
had a couple of quick questions. So you mentioned earlier, again, in regards to the public versus private spaces, that a private space, an example of that may be a ticketed event. Is ICE allowed to buy their own tickets to gain entry and then be able to enforce as a participant of a private event that is happening?
I think that's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I've been wondering about those ticketed events, right? Like, why couldn't they just buy a ticket and go harass people there? I don't know the answer to that. I think that would really have to be tested by the courts. And then, like, it depends on, what if it's a ticketed event that 30 people are allowed versus a football stadium? Doesn't at some point in time that become public when you're filling a football stadium full of people? So, you know, my husband actually works for an Ethiopian soccer federation, and they were really worried about having their annual competition because, you needed tickets, but it's not really private. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. My second question was just wanting to circle back around, I guess, pathways that people have if the feeling is though ICE acted outside of their authority. So for example, if they need probable cause and, there are these rules and regulations, if they're not following the rules and regulations, I guess, I'm getting the feeling there's not much recourse people have in those instances, but I guess just looking for more information of how those situations are handled, or is there recourse that people can take?
Again, I think it is difficult under this administration because they've dismantled the civil rights, the DHS Civil Rights Office. I would reach out to known legal activist organizations such as ACLU or Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, because I mean, they might be interested in doing something.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay. You guys have great questions.
Okay. Anyone else?
I don't have a question. I was the last one was the same type of question I had that Carrie just asked about. I mean, really, the checks and balances of what's happening with ICE. It feels like there's very little checks and balances. They can kind of get away with it.
We'll have to remember this if we ever, have a Congress again.
Yeah, it would be nice.
I mean, we have to. This is unchecked power, really.
Yeah. So I don't have any other questions. I look forward to getting the information that you presented to us, and that we can sort of disseminate as we're able to. And I just really wanted to thank you for your presentation. It was fantastic. All
right. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you again, Attorney Church. Really appreciate your time and everything that you're doing as well.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing Attorney Church to go first and to kind of mix up the agenda. I appreciate your flexibility there. So let's take a couple steps back. I would like to motion the approval of the July 2025 minutes. Can I get a second for that?
I'll second.
Great. Pat, roll call, please.
We have a motion to approve the July 2025 minutes as presented to the members via email, seconded by Chair Creamer, seconded by Member Drew Schneblin. I'm going to take a roll call vote of those present. Chair Guillermo Creamer Jr.
Aye.
Vice Chair Randy Fellman,
Aye.
Clerk Carrie Witherell,
Aye.
Member Drew Schneblin,
Aye.
Member Anahit Marudian.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Great, thank you so much. Moving along, really quickly, I want to acknowledge the fact that specifically, the first 2 weeks of September in the city of Worcester is Pride season. So I just wanted to make a quick acknowledge of that for folks. There are plenty of activities that are happening over the next 2 weeks that I think start on September 1st and go through the first 2 weeks of September. If I'm not mistaken, the Worcester Pride Committee, along with other community partners, have already done some events, including kind of a civic engagement effort to have the local candidates attend. And so the point of this was to ensure that the commission is aware, but also the general public is aware that Worcester Pride season is among us. And I encourage all of you and all of those who will be watching this meeting to join the festivities during difficult times like these. It's critical that we ensure that visibility it's at its maximum. I am a very proud gay man, and so for me, it's obviously personal. But I know that for many of you, you know someone, or you care about someone, or you love someone who is also within the LGBTQ community. So, just wanted to kind of bring that to everyone's attention. It's next weekend, I think, is the actual festival that takes place right behind City Hall. So I'll have Pat circulate the dates and stuff once I have them in front of her. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of make that acknowledgement. Awesome. Somewhat of a short agenda tonight. That never happens here. But the next thing on my agenda is a presentation from two of our fellow commissioners. I am actually going to toss it over to them to take it away. They will be talking about the K-9 policy recommendation. The other policy recommendation we're holding off on until Kevin is back. He really wanted to be a part of that one. So that one has been tabled for now. But for now, I will turn it over to Clerk Witherell and member, I'm not saying this correctly yet, Marudian.
You said it just perfectly.
Perfect. All right, I'll hand the floor over to the two of you.
Thank you so much. So I can start us off. We kind of divided the work and then did a lot of discussion in terms of, how to structure it. So I'll tell you a little bit about, the background and context, and then Carrie will tell you review of the Worcester Police Department draft of the K-9 policy. So just to give you a broader history about the K-9 usage, K-9 units or police dog teams have been used in American law enforcement since, the early 20th century for tasks like tracking suspects, crowd control, and usually narcotics detection. They are seen by some as useful tools. However, there are opinions regarding suspect apprehension and the usage of K-9 that's been viewed kind of controversial. Historically, police dogs have been used to attack Black and Indigenous peoples and to prevent enslaved people from fleeing. This documentation was according the NAACP 2023 report. And additionally, they were used during the civil rights era to intimidate peaceful protesters. So in our days today, the concern is mainly around excessive use of force and the usage of K-9. The bites by the dogs can cause severe injuries. So that was more of like a broader context of how K-9 is being used. And then I can give you a little bit more about specifically Worcester Police Department. So the Worcester PD has been using K-9 for, very long time, for decades. The department highlights the usage of the police dogs for usually drug searches and locating missing persons purposes. However, there have been some, publicized incidents involving bites during, arrests, which raise questions whether or not the usage of K9 is appropriate. After a 2-year investigation by the Department of Justice, a report was released in December of 2024 that found that the Worcester Police Department engages in excessive use of force, including unjustified use of tasers, police dogs, and hit strikes. The report also included that these practices violate the 4th Amendment of the Constitution and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The 4th one is regarding the excessive force usage, and then the 14th is related to the due process. And officers rapidly escalate minor incidents by using more force than necessary, including during the encounters with people who have behavioral health disabilities or are in crisis. This is word-to-word definition description that the Department of Justice provided and stated regarding the Worcester Police Department's K9 usage. And I'll pass it to Carrie, who can tell you a little bit about review of Worcester Police Department, the draft of their policy a little bit further.
Great. Thank you so much, Anahit. As a result of some of that background and context that Anahit just provided for us, there was a new specialized unit policy that was developed, which Guillermo will go over in the future. And so the K9 unit is a part of those specialized units and falls under that policy. But there is currently a new draft policy specific to the K9 unit as well, which is what we took a look at. So this policy, which was sent out, I think, in the May agenda for your reference, it outlines the purpose and procedures of the K9 unit, such as the organizational structure, handler selection, deployment of a K9, including the use of force using K9s, and the reporting of K9 deployments. We reviewed this policy and analyzed it to the extent in which it addressed the recommendations that were set forth in the DOJ report and the racial equity audit, which were both completed in 2024, as well as to how closely it aligned with practice recommendations that are in the field. So that included the standards that were set forth by the Post Commission, as well as policy recommendations that were published by the Police Executive Research Forum in 2020 and the Stanford Center for Racial Justice in 2022. And I do want to note that the standards that were put forth by the Police Executive Research Forum were standards that are recommended by the NAACP to be enforced by police departments. And it was evident to me in reviewing both policies that the Worcester PD did take a lot of their language from that policy. So it did appear to me as an outsider that they had taken a lot of those recommendations into consideration. So overall, we did feel as though the policy is largely in line with the standards set forth in the literature, and it does address many of the concerns detailed in the DOJ report and the racial equity audit. For example, it prohibits the use of K9s for crowd management, mass demonstration, protest, or riot. It also details reporting procedures and procedures for incidents in which there are injuries caused by the K9. The policy also discusses the review of K9 incidents and states that there will be regular review of K9 data as a whole, in addition to each incident individually. However, one of the largest gaps found were that procedures to identify and address racial and other disparities were not specifically addressed in the policy. So some questions that came up in the review. So first, WPD is planning to create a specific K9 use of force form, which is in excess of what's legally mandated. So that would be an additional form. And I really would love the HRC to be able to review this form before it's implemented to make sure we're capturing data on inequities that may be important. There was also some lack of clarity, I felt, around the use of K9s in response to behavioral health incidents. So the draft policy does state that K9s that are trained in tracking but not apprehension can be used when someone is experiencing mental health episode if the person's not believed to be assaultive or armed, but it doesn't address whether they can be used for apprehension if that person is being assaultive or is armed. And guidance given by the Post Commission does state that nothing prohibits law enforcement officers from using necessary and proportionate force. to bring an individual against their will to the hospital for evaluation pursuant to a Section 12, which is the regulation that allows involuntary transport to a hospital. So it was unclear to me what the WPD's stance is regarding those incidents that may turn assaultive, which can frequently happen in sections of a Section 12. So I'd love some additional clarity around their stance regarding the use of a patrol canine in the event of a mental health emergency. And finally, the policy states that a warning will be given in the 3 predominant languages of Worcester. This will be required once Worcester has the technology provided to be able to do so, for example, in form of recording. So some questions I had were if it is also possible to obtain in the moment translation to another language, if the language of the subject is known, and also what the status is to obtaining this technology. So the recommendations, we did send out our report and our recommendations is fairly lengthy, so we will not go through step by step. You all have it there to read, and we will certainly field any questions, comments, concerns that you all have. We'd love to have that discussion. But in brief, our recommendations did primarily revolve around providing additional specificity in several portions of the policy. In places where the policy referenced other policies, we were looking for them to either reiterate that language in the current policy. So for example, if they're referencing use of force, that's a separate policy. So either reiterate that language or provide specific citations to lead someone to that other policy for the purposes of clarity and easier access to information. We'd also love to see a separate review section added aimed at improving data collection and analysis, particularly for the purpose of identifying and addressing racial and other disparities, because that is not mentioned. So they do mention disproportionate bite ratios by different dogs and whatnot, but not specifically looking at these equity issues. And we would hope for them to continue to work with the Executive Office of DEI and the HRC to develop and strengthen this response. There are many other recommendations in there around community engagement in review, but we wanted to, again, you have it on paper, so we just wanted to provide that in that overview and open it up to discussion.
Great. Thank you both so much for taking the time, and I hope you enjoyed kind of working together and getting to know each other a little more, so thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions? I think one of the things that came up in the conversation was requesting the actual document for the commission to review. Can we get that circulated, Pat?
Do you mean this document that Carrie just talked about?
Carrie, was there a specific form that you wanted the commission to review?
Oh, you mean the
I
form
don't
for
believe it's been developed yet.
force? I don't think they've developed the form yet. I think what she was asking for was that we be partners with them as they develop the form, if I'm not mistaken.
So is this,
Yeah,
what
correct.
are our thoughts here? Is this a motion for us to send? No, I have a conversation with the chief.
And
I'll
I think
bring it
since
up.
we're already reviewing
Yeah,
the
it's
policy.
internal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So what I'll say is I have a meeting with the chief coming up. I will use some of that time to bring it up. And so if Clerk Witherell, if you could just send me an email, she can do that, right? She can send me an email. Just me. Pat will send me an email with the information, and I'll add it to my agenda with the chief. I want to make sure we're
Perfect,
doing
thank you.
everything by the book. Yes, Drew?
Oh, just 2 very small points of clarification. You said they mentioned the bite ratios. Is it bite ratios by the dogs? Like which dogs are biting more versus like who they're biting?
So yeah, so what they have addressed is that they will do bite ratios per dog. So I believe it was if a dog is biting over 20% of the time that they're deployed, that would be a fairly high bite ratio. So they'll investigate that. Also, if the unit as a whole goes above 20%, there's nowhere in the policy that addresses who they're biting. So that's where I would like more kind of bulk up in the policy is data collection and analysis around who is being bit.
It feels maybe more important to know who they're biting than which dog is doing the biting. And also I noticed in your reporting, which both of you did a great job, this was great, that they don't list which crimes as well for who they're deploying. So I just like right on top of that, within that same context, right? We want not just who they're biting, but for what crimes they're being deployed, and when they're biting within what crimes. Because I feel like maybe if they're biting for things that are smaller offenses, and maybe I think we probably agree they shouldn't be releasing the dogs during smaller offenses, but we don't know, right? That's the thing. So yeah, I think this is all great. It was mostly just point of clarification on some of those things. I read through this and it's really, really, really well done. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was one thing I noticed. Oh, sorry. Were you talking, Anahit? Oh, I thought
No,
heard
I was just saying thank you. Go ahead. No worries.
Didn't want to talk over you. So in one of the sections of the policy, I think it's pretty clear in a lot of sections, it says specifically if there is a threat towards the officer or the public. But when it gets to a section on a fleeing subject, there's less clarity. So is this fleeing from any sort of crime? And in the literature, there are some examples of a very, very minor nonviolent crime occurring and that escalating to the point of actually a death of a subject. And so there were, in those two policies that we had referenced, they do have actually the same specific example of detailing which crimes are appropriate, and they are, significant violent crimes in which purpose being like, somebody escaping for a fairly minor crime is unfortunate, but not as unfortunate as excessive use of force. And there was something, and I think to your point too, I think that's why I'd like them to partner with us on the forum so that we make sure that we're capturing all of these details that are going to be important to know. So thank you for that feedback.
Great. Again, thank you both so much for taking the time to do that and for working together. So I know the agenda this month seemed light, but that does not mean that the work that we do is light. We'll have more packed agendas as time goes on. I think for the month of August, the agenda suited kind of what we were expecting. Some transparency notes from my end. I'm continuing my meetings with Pat and Kevin on a very regular basis. And so if there are any concerns or comments that you'd like me to bring up to them in that type of a setting, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or to reach out to Pat directly, and she'll bring it up as well in our conversations. Another note is that I'm meeting with the chief of police soon, and then I'm hoping that'll be at a pretty frequent cadence, but he's a busy man, so we'll see. I'll loop you all in kind of on high level stuff, not necessarily on the details of that conversation, because I do want to create that relationship as well with him. Next month, we will be meeting last Monday as we always do. It'll also be Hispanic Heritage Month, so I suspect that we will have a formal statement to push forward there. I see Clerk Witherall's hand is up.
Hi, just a quick question as a new member to the commission. So with something, like the canine policy recommendation, where does that go next, and how does that eventually make its way back to the WPD?
So, and Pat can fill in the blanks here, but the way that I am interpreting this is that ultimately I'll present this to the chief, not the full presentation, but just very much we're having a conversation about this. My hope is that we can actually formalize something between, your agency and our commission. So that's kind of my next steps with this. I don't know if Pat, you want to say something different.
Yes, I already shared your recommendations too with Kevin and his meetings with the chief. He can discuss them, as well as we in the office undertake a review of every one of the policies. So we, aside from your recommendations, had recommendations of our own. So typically what we try to do is blend them all together. But I don't know moving forward if that's the route we're going to go down, or just send everything separately. That'll be to be determined, since we have new leadership with this commission. But yes, the recommendations are always passed on from us to the police department.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was just wondering.
No, thank you. Any more comments or questions from commissioners before I motion to adjourn? No? Okay, with that, can I get a second for a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Pat, can I get a roll call, please?
We have a motion to adjourn at 7:24 PM by the chair, Guillermo Creamer Jr., seconded.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said my name and I said aye.
Seconded by Vice Chair Randy Feldman. I'm going to take a roll call now, please. Chairperson Guillermo Creamer Jr.
Aye.
Vice Chair Randy Feldman.
I too.
Clerk Carrie Witherell.
Aye.
Member Drew Schneblin.
I mean, Guillermo wants to leave, so aye.
Member Anahit Marudian.
Aye.
The motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:25. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.